Okay, great. Looks like we've got a nice little crowd that joined us this morning. Thank you for participating in the launch and the overall view of Game of Pod. So we're excited to do this demo for you guys this morning. For those that don't know me, my name is Ryan Riley. I'm based out of the Austin studio, and I'm the product lead for the product community. I also have joining me Melissa Crow. She's the head of the project community. So in collaboration with the two of us, we're going to go through just a brief overview of what Game of Pods is. And then we're going to do a live demo of what's in production to date, and then show you guys actually how you can get involved like tomorrow. So for those of you that are not familiar with Game of Pods, the concept around this, and over the next hour, where the goal is for you to see how the world of Game of Pods delivers engagement for any team. It is a change management accelerator. It's focused on building a culture of continuous improvement. And really, it does two things. It not only empowers teams, but also individuals to carve out their own growth path in full alignment with the client's business goals. So the three key areas that we focused on for Game of Pods is really what it does is it focuses on the best practices from an agile perspective. And we've got these three kind of buckets, you know, the organizational aspects, it promotes best practices and you get rewarded for that. The other piece too is the goal of this is to motivate you. So as you get into the tool, you should feel empowered as an individual that's part of a pod. And then the biggest part here is the competitive nature of it. You'll be able to see how you stack up against other pods. You can see the level of your pod through its maturity. Now, the way that the world of Game of Pods is structured is we've got two aspects, and today's demo is going to be primarily focused around the delivery world. But the delivery world, it's really all about the journey it takes on a mission of delivering great products and solutions. To achieve that, you have to have the tools to help understand where you're heading and where you're going and how to get there. GOP aims to do that specific piece. Through the delivery world, the way that it's structured is pods receive experience points by setting KPIs, our 4 dimensions that are part of our pod framework. You can set goals and milestones, and during that process, you earn XP points and your pod levels up. Now, from a talent world perspective, this is all about you as an individual. One of the things that we're really excited about releasing is the ability to see your career path and your skills that you need to advance your career based off of the community that you're involved in. Now, when we talk about the delivery world, you know, the biggest thing is like, how do you get involved? And once you join Game of Pods and you're part of a pod, one of the first things that you do is you define your KPIs. Now, for those that don't know what the KPIs are, part of our pod framework, there's 4 of them. One's focused on velocity, and that is primarily focused on team productivity and predictability and responsiveness. The other piece is quality, you know, the degree of excellence. What's the output? How stable is it? And then we also have product impact. And what I mean by product impact is the impact to the business. Is the business growing? Are they adopting it? You can select, you know, like metrics around customer ratings. And then the 4th one is around autonomy. So that's kind of the high level view of that. But once you define those KPIs, you can begin earning badges based off of those 4 dimensions. You can pick quests based off of what you're trying to accomplish. And then you can earn also individual badges like peer-to-peer badges and personal badges during your progression through the game itself. And then finally, you can earn trophies. And these are based off of the maturity of your team and the badges that you selected in the past. And then you just continue the involvement of this until your pod excels to a level where it meets the demand of the client and also internal team members. Now, to give you a little more insight of that, I'm gonna let Melissa kind of walk through a little more detail around those 4 dimensions. Melissa, do you mind speaking to this for a few seconds?
Absolutely. So this slide just contains some basic ideas of the type of metrics we could measure in each of these dimensions. This is not an inclusive list. It's intended to just kind of get your minds thinking on things that you might be able to measure for your team, particular to your project, right? So every dimension is the same across all pods, but the metrics within the dimensions are very customized to your project, your team. It's important to note that even if your pod isn't a typical cross-functional pod, you can find and identify a metric to measure in each dimension, right? So for example, let's say that your pod doesn't have built-in QA, right? That might be handled on the client side. It's a separate team. They quite haven't evolved in their agile maturity to have it built into your pod. You can still have quality metrics, right? It could be metrics around the number of kickbacks found in your unit testing, for example, or your automation of unit testing. That could be a quality metric that still is controlled by the pod, right? So that's just an example to show how this is very flexible for each individual team. We do have a much more robust repository of other suggested KPIs, but it is important to note, if you don't see one on there that fits you, make up your own that matches your team, your client, your project, the product that you're working on.
Great, thanks, Melissa. And that is a key thing. You know, these are just examples, but one of the powerful things about the way that the application is structured is that you can set them up for your unique needs. The thing that Melissa and her team provide is the onboarding process and provide examples to get, you know, any of the pods ramped up and into the system pretty quickly. Now, when we talked about, you know, how the game works itself, we've got kind of two categories for this. We've got on the left-hand side here, this is more around the pod activities, and then you've got individual activities as well. On the left-hand side, you've got badges and trophies. And what badges do, basically they shape the DNA of the pod. Pods receive badges for their practices and the things they achieve as a team. These help that pod identify and learn best practices and structure in order to better perform on those tasks. Some examples of these would be, you know, applying lean principles on a daily basis or following, you know, best agile practices through stand-ups. We've got a slew of badges within the system that we'll show you here shortly. The other thing is the pod trophies. Now, trophies are set up to reward achievements. They are primarily orientated to reward pods performance and relate to their core function objective set. Examples around these is setting key milestones or meeting those. You actually launched a product or you overperformed in specific KPIs. So now that we've kind of laid the ground around this piece, and then individual awards. This piece right here is to identify and select individuals on your team for overachieving or doing just something that's best practices. Personal badges are something that you can award not only to your team that's on your pod, but also any team that's within the system itself. Okay, let's actually do the demo. Okay, so you gotta kind of put on your hat and think, you just logged in, you had your credentials. What you see here on this screen is the pod that I'm a member of. This is called the Rivendell pod. Gives you a short description and you have full capabilities of changing your profile to whatever you want for your pod. The main layout is that it shows your position, and this team right now is in position 13, and I'll explain what that means a little bit later. And the total number of points this pod has actually received. Now on here, the primary piece is around this maturity path. And really what this maturity path is, it's one place where you can visualize the evolution of your pod. Every time your pod earns a trophy or a badge, this will be reflected on this path as growth receiving new levels. And when I say levels, at the same time, it allows you to expect a certain amount of autonomy and good practice from your pod acting as a measure itself. So really the idea is that every pod that gets into the system, they start off at incipients. And as you request and earn badges, the team grows over time, and the goal is to get to elite. Now, one of the things around this is, as I mentioned before, you know, badges shape the DNA of the pod, and then trophies reward those achievements. One of the things that you can do when you set up your pod and you've got your KPIs defined is you can set up goals. And this team here, you can see they've already set up goals. But really, goals help your pod focus on what's important to your team to learn right now. We've got two buckets. We've got strategic goals, and we also have tactical goals. The strategic goals focus on the long-term game. They are directly related to the output of the pod, the measurement over time, and the likelihood of being able to achieve those over multiple iterations. And then the tactical goals are things that maybe there's an area your pod needs to focus on. Maybe you enter retro, maybe there's areas that, you know, velocity's down, and these are areas that you want to focus on. So you can set these in here, and then I'll just expand one real quick. So this team right now, they're in the middle of a sprint, and one of the areas they want to focus on is increasing velocity. They'd like to reach level 1 for its velocity KPI and be able to sustain it for 3+ sprints. And they've selected this trophy if they actually get this. Now, when we talk about, you know, level 1 velocity KPIs, what does that mean? Well, if I go over to the KPI section, and I'll let Melissa kind of walk through this, but let me frame it up real quick. The KPI section is once you join a pod, you set up core KPIs. And again, they're based on these 4 dimensions that we have listed out here. Then Melissa, you mind just walking through how you add them and then how you measure these things, and I'll tie it back to that goal that was set on the homepage.
Sure. So in this example here for this pod, they have chosen these 3 KPIs for velocity, right? That's what's particular to them. It's what's important for their project and their client. This is what an indicator of success is for this particular dimension for this project. To add them was a very, very simple process. If you click Add KPI Running, you'll see here that everything except those first 2 are completely free form. So you pick your dimension, and then the criteria under that are nested. It's a nested relationship. The name of the metric is free form. You choose something that matters to your pod. It's indicative of what you're measuring. You enter your baseline, which is typically the average of your performance over the last 3 sprints, right? So you're identifying, this is where I'm at today, so that I can identify my target level 1, 2, and 3. And that's kind of like my maturity path of where I want to go. So let's say for this one, my baseline is 50. I might say a very feasible goal might be 60, then 70, then 80, right? Whereas if my baseline was already 80, my next goal might be 90, then 100, right? We need to know where we're starting today so that we identify where we want to go. You completely select the metric value, right? What unit of measure are you choosing here, right? It's very customizable based on the metric you've selected in this dimension. And then you choose at which frequency you're going to measure these, right? So is it by sprint? Is it by quarter? Is it by release or milestone? Every one of these is customized for the particular project, the client, the dimension, and the metric itself. And once you've got those things filled out, you'll click save, and it adds that metric to the dimension, and it would show up here just like this, right? And so there's your kind of plan that you see. This is what we're working towards. Now, once you've set that plan up, you're going to go back in, let's say at the end of your iteration or your sprint, you're going to say, well, let me input some real values. At the very top of this page, there's a button called Input Values. You click this button and it changes everything to a text field to the very next sprint of where you need to enter your values. So you enter the ones that you have and you click Save, and then you've got real data there. So if we go back to the graphs, Ryan, we can see where the real data is displayed visually for you, right? So within each dimension, next to each KPI, you can see how you've been performing over time, right? So we see in this example that they have been above their baseline all but 1 sprint, right? And if you look at the last several sprints, more than 3 there, we're above our level 1. So we can see I'm performing already at my target level 1 for 3 sprints in a row. I know that I've now earned a trophy. Let me go request that trophy, right? So it's very easy to kind of track where you're at when you're eligible for the next trophy and what you do need to do to get the next trophy, right? So if you had only been for 2 sprints at a particular target level, you know to maybe make a goal for your team for the next sprint is let's really buckle down and stay performing at this level. We're going to get that next trophy, that next set of points we need to level up our pod. The same goes
Great, for yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Same goes for what?
The same thing for every one of these dimensions. And we should note that there is no rule about how many KPIs you should have for each dimension. You need to have at least 1, but some dimensions may have 4 or 5, right? Some may only have 2. I've seen some pods who their focus is very much on quality and they've got 10 KPIs identified, but they only have 2 for each of the others. When I see something like that, what I also see up here in this donut graph that Ryan's showing is that the weight for quality in that particular scenario is much higher than everything else. They might have 60% of the weight on quality, because the quality dimension is the most important dimension for that pod. That is what the business goals are highly focused on, right? Is high quality. You might have another pod that may be very much focused on velocity, because speed to market is super important. They're coming out with a very competitive feature. They want to be the first in their space to make it to market. So that's the thing that's going to be the most important to them. We would likely see more KPIs measured in that dimension than the others, right? So again, to repeat this ongoing theme here, very, very customizable for your pod, your project, your client.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Melissa. The other thing too that we're starting to hear a lot, speaking with clients, and then also the pods that are actually within game of pods, is we've got this, and again the key thing is beta, but the key thing is that what we're hearing is like, are there going to be any integration points? What we've done right now is it's manual entry, but we've structured it and designed it so it's a low lift. But there has been conversations around pulling in specific metrics from Jira, DevOps, and we're planning on putting on the roadmap, because it feels like some of these elements would be easier if we put those in there. The other piece too that we're planning on doing is some automation aspects. So as you set these goals, some of these things, some badges and awards, can actually be just automatically awarded to the team based off of meeting specific levels. So those are things to come, but I just wanted to give you, everyone on the call, a little bit of a vision of what we're planning on doing with this. The core foundations here, we're getting positive feedback around it, specifically around our 4 dimensions, and the ability to make adjustments around the metrics unique to the client's needs. Okay. Now that we've seen kind of like setting goals, let me just bring this piece to home. So one of the things that this team has done is that they've set a goal for this sprint to make sure that their velocity is at level 1 for 3 sprints. So as you can see here real quickly, they're almost there. Sprint 38, they're at level 3. Sprint 39, they're at level 3, and they're on track, to actually receive that goal. Okay, now on to some of the fun stuff. So, you've seen kind of the elements, the core pieces of it, but how do you actually like participate within the game? One of the areas that I probably one of my favorite areas within this application is all these different types of trophies and badges within this. Again, as I mentioned, trophies, as you set them, it's set into a continuous improvement mindset and progress in Game of Pods. Your pod will begin to earn trophies around these 3 main focus areas. You've got the categories are KPIs, and those are the KPIs that are set on the KPI screen itself. You can set specific trophies for meeting those, like the team has already done, 1 for velocity. You can set them around growth, and this is around specifically growing your pod or new members. And then the other category is around client satisfaction. So if I go to this kind of view, you can see that we've got them listed out here. And again, what we did is, these are based on our core values and agile practices. So most of these are focused around the KPIs itself, but a big part too is that when you set this up within the system is getting alignment with the client as well. We're also moving forward with a client experience, a client dashboard, and we're getting feedback onto what would resonate for a client on the metrics that are reported out. There's even discussions around being able to have the client specific access to badges and awards that they can only provide to the team itself. So, bringing that integration in with the client, have them have a little fun with this system as well. The other piece, as I mentioned, is growth. So as your team grows and it becomes part of the pod, you can get recognized for that growth. And that's where the mitosis comes into play. The other piece is around pod badges. Again, we've got 6 categories listed out for this. They're around client alignment, the cross-functionality of the team. Project management is a huge piece of this. And then obviously dev best practices, performance, and then innovation. And they're laid out this way so that, it's basically the evolution of a team. If you think about, when you start off, it is a big part is around client alignments. And then as the team grows, as from a cross-functional perspective, the better you guys communicate, there's aspects in here we have badges to support those and get rewarded for those. Project management, same with these. As long as there's alignment with the team, the backlog is groomed, you know, you guys are sprints ahead, the stand-ups are efficient. There's all different types of badges to be rewarded for those specific things. Same for best practices, performance, and then the innovation pieces. The other piece in here that we have is personal badges. And personal badges are somewhat unique. The difference between the pod badges and trophies is that there is a request process for those. You can't just request a pod badge and get it. Personal badges, on the other hand, you can actually send an award to any individual that's on your pod or any team member that's within the system of Game of Pods. And I'll give you an example. So let's say that one of my members is an advocate. You know, they're doing solid communication, not only with the client, but the team, and they're just rocking it right now. And I want to at least give them some recognition for it. I simply find the one that I want, and for this one, it's the advocate. And I can just tap right here, and I can send the reward. And for this one, I'm going to send it to one. Actually, let's send it to Marcella. Marcella hasn't seen a lot of love on rewards. So I can select Marcella, and then I can describe, you know, why I would want to give this award to her. Let's see, great conversations. Clients. Thank you. Then I can send that award. And that's immediately sent to her. And then I'll show the profile section here in a minute. But once you actually receive an award, you get notified for it, and it shows up within your profile section. The other piece I'll go back to is the pod badges. Let's say that you've already set your goals, but you want to request another badge during the sprint or wherever you are in your development cycle. You can simply tap on, we'll say the Depender, and simply request this award. And this is for Rivendell. I can explain why I want to request this award. And then once I submit the award, certain users will have access to this section called requests. Basically what requests are, it eliminates any type of gaming of the system itself. They go into a queue here. The podification team will review this. And if it's valid and the team aligns with it, you simply get it approved. Now, once it's actually approved, what ends up happening is that it shows up on your maturity path. And you can actually see the points that you receive for it, and your team levels up. The other piece that I mentioned too was around personal badges. So I just awarded one to an individual on my team. In here, we have another section called members. You can see all the members that are on your team. And you can actually send an award from this screen as well. And we can just take a look at JP here real quick. You can look at his profile. You can tap here, send an award. And you can see within JP that he's received multiple awards. These are individual awards that he's received. And what's interesting about this as well is that JP's part of a pod right now, but let's say he transitions off of this or through mitosis goes to a different pod. Any of the awards you receive for the life that you're within Game of Pods, it follows your path. And that leads into the talent world aspect, which I'll get to once we finish this demo piece. But you start to accumulate these pieces. And you can see that JP right now, his personal XP points is 165. You can also see the awards that he's received over time, broken out by different buckets. Next gen, no haters. These are all the pods that he's part of. Here's his past pods. You can see that they follow him. If he would have received anything, you would see those there. Okay, so now you've seen the members. The other piece too is around the awards. So really this is just a history of all the awards this pod has received. It's kind of an interesting view to see all the activity in here, all the activity that goes on, and these all go back to the actual maturity path as well. And then you can also see the goals. The way this is structured is these are the active goals that the team has requested and is actually trying to obtain. And then down below, you can see all the goals they actually completed and finished. What's interesting about once you complete a goal, let me go back to the first screen here. What you'll see is that you've got, there's a time limit that's shown here. For strategic and development, or excuse me, for strategic and tactical goals, you can select 1 to 3 different types of badges you'd like to obtain. But you can see right here, this team only has 3 days left to actually receive that or achieve that goal. Once they have that goal achieved, it's very similar to doing a retro. You can have a discussion around it. So this one, they received it 1 week ago. And you can just basically, very similar to like a stand-up, what went well, or sorry, excuse me, a retro, what went well, what could have been improved. This gives you a little bit of a historical view of why the goal was set and the reasoning behind it. Okay, now the final piece in here is around the pods. So, earlier I mentioned that there's this positioning aspect. Right now, Rivendell's in position 13. The way that we've got this structured, if you just tap on pods, what you can see within Game of Pods, you can see all the pods and see where you rank. And the ranking is based off not only maturity, but also the number of points that that team has received. So as the team matures, the levels change. The other interesting thing that you can do too is that you can drill down into one to see maybe they're doing something a little bit different than you are, or maybe there's something that you want to adjust based off of their maturity. One of the things that we're working on is once you set these goals, we're calling them quests, and they're based off of those categories I mentioned earlier, where it'll help define an area that you may actually want to focus on. And, eventually, the idea is that we incorporate in, some machine learning aspects in here to provide recommendations to your team on areas that you may want to improve on based on the KPIs that you set within the system. Melissa, I didn't miss anything, did I? I feel like I covered everything. Yes.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Great. So the next thing is like we've done the demo, and while we're recording of this, but the other aspect of it is, how would you implement this in your day-to-day? And Melissa and her team have done a great job providing different examples based off of the dynamics of the pod, the client structure, the business demands. And I would like, Melissa, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of running through this at a high level on how you could actually get involved with it and setting up your pod within GOP.
Yeah, sure. One of the first questions we often get is like, how much time does this take? Like my team's very busy. I don't want to add any overhead. Like, well, what's going on with this whole thing? After you've done the work, which is really brain power work, right? The time to think through which KPIs you're going to measure that are aligned with your client. It's a couple of minutes to set up those KPIs. And then this chart here just gives you some ideas of how you incorporate Game of Pods in your day-to-day practices that you're already following, right? Like by and large, most of our teams are following some flavor of Agile, right? Your Kanban, maybe you're following Scrum, maybe you're in a blend with Scrumban. You're doing some level of planning. You've got some kind of iteration, sprints, some kind of daily stand-up or daily planning, meeting with the team. And we've got retrospectives at some kind of cadence. So these are perfect times to incorporate Game of Pods. For example, in planning, that's when you should talk about what's going to be the goal, right? What is our goal for this iteration or this sprint? And what badges can we target with that particular goal, right? Throughout the sprint is a perfect time to recognize when you see great examples of teamwork or embodiment of our company values, or maybe you've implemented a new best practice, right? You improved one of the practices you were following. You can go get a badge during your sprint. Same thing with daily stand-ups. As you see those things happening, it's a couple of clicks, right? Within the system. Retrospectives are a perfect time to evaluate those goals, right? It's the end of my sprint. Did I achieve those goals? Yes, no, what do I need to do differently if I didn't achieve them? And go request the awards that you had targeted with those goals, right? So with a couple of extra minutes in these ongoing ceremonies you're already following, you're doing Game of Pods, right? You're playing Game of Pods and you're leveling up your pod. No extra effort. I would venture to say it's about maybe an hour or so in the week, right? If you add up all your minutes that you've spent during the week in the tool. That's after you've got yourself set up and running and understanding the KPIs.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Okay, so the next piece of this is what our team is actually actively developing as we speak. And it was the piece that I alluded to earlier, which was the talent world. This is all about the individual. Delivery world And again, they're all part of one application, but Deliveroo focuses on the pod and their execution and their maturity over time. The talent world focuses on the actual individual. And for this, I'm just going to kind of go through the brief path on how you actually get engaged with this. So again, you just join Game of Pods. The difference here is that when you join Game of Pods, even when you're part of a pod now within the system, you set up your profile. And we're actually in the process of making that more robust and bringing in some more gaming aspects up to it. But the idea is you set it up, you create your avatar. And one of the things you do, excuse me, is you add your skills. And what I mean by skills is, you know, each one of us live and work in different communities. But one of the things that you do is you add the skills that you bring to the table. And there's an evaluation process. But what that does is it gives you a level set and clearly defines what you're bringing. And then what we allow that to do is it helps us define a path. And I say we, part of it is your path as well. You get to set up where you want to focus, the skills that you need to acquire to continue to evolve your career with Cognizant Softvision. The other piece too is once you've defined that path, you can set specific goals that you want to focus on. And in there, what we have for each one of the communities, we have, I would consider, a landing page that shows community activities, what's going on in the UX design community, dev community, project community. One of the things that we constantly tout, not only internally, but also with clients, is how we have these communities that you can reach out, you can connect with other individuals. Well, this is just another bridge to allow that to happen. How nice would it be to be able to go to a landing page and see all the activity that's happening amongst the design community? And then that's where you can learn from others. Even within your own community, you can learn from others. Then again, bottom piece here is that, you know, the idea is that once you're in the system, and in the talent world, they live and breathe together as far as the delivery world, but you have your whole career section within it as well. And the concept obviously is that you eventually do join a pod and then you begin to support your pod by leveling them up. So these are just some screenshots. Quite a bit of this stuff is in the development environment right now. But on the left-hand side, what you see is what I was mentioning earlier around skills. So eventually, once you set your skills, the way it works is that they're measured through XP points, and then we give you a value to those things. Now, this is an area we're still working through. One of the things that we're realizing is that, you know, we need to adopt to different types of studios and culture. But really, the concept is that we would like to measure based on 4 different types of areas. You know, impact, autonomy, social influence. Those things are all going to be within the talent world itself. The other piece is that I mentioned you've got on your left-hand side here, which is your career path. This is your actual quest along the way. And the concept around this is that, like, let's take the product community. If you join as a BA, I would hope that you have aspirations to become a product manager. Well, what do you need to do to actually become a product manager? The idea is that within Talent World, you can see the additional skills or classes or events that you need to or would like to attend to continue to, you know, add additional tools in your tool belts. Within Talent World, you'll be able to see that it's clearly defined. You can see exactly where you are and what you actually need to do to continue your advancement. The piece on the right here is just an example of what we're building out for our community experience. This one is just the UX design community. You can kind of see the ambassadors on the right-hand side for that design community. The other things that we are looking into incorporating into this is, you know, we constantly get messages within workplace around events that are coming up. Well, how nice would it be to be able to see all the events that are being planned for the design community? Just because you're in the product community doesn't mean you can't attend one of the design events. The whole idea around the community pages is to continue to bridge that gap and accelerate that communication. And the other thing is that you may see someone in here as far as their evolution with their career that may be able to help support you on one of your accounts that you're working on. That's kind of the idea around each one of the community pages. Now, the reason I show this screen is because, you know, the reason that, well, 2 reasons we're having this demo today is we want everyone to get involved in this. This screen just gives you a real quick high-level view of the current activity within Game of Pods. We've got multiple accounts, and it continues to grow on a weekly basis. Right now, we've got over 8 countries involved with this, a little over 40 pods. that are actively engaged with Game of Pods itself. And then we're reaching, I think the total right now is around a little over 400 participants. And now keep in mind, we just started the open beta. So as we all know, based on all hands, this will become something that is required for all of us to participate in. And when we say required, one of the things that I feel very fortunate to have the exposure to is the team that I'm working with. We've got some amazing folks that are building out not only the user experience, but also from a development perspective. And the one thing that I really pride ourselves on, and as we evolve, and get more people into the system, is feedback on the experience. We want to build this tool for you, right? The tool was built to this date from a delivery perspective based off of feedback, but it's called a beta for a reason. We're looking for feedback from the tool itself to make it fit your needs, not only from a pod perspective, but also from a personal career path growth perspective. So as you get into the system, we're going to be incorporating in a feedback tool in there. And it's kind of no holds bar, like the more we know what you're looking for, the more we know what to build out. So what to expect and how to get involved. I'm going to kick this back over to Melissa. We didn't really clarify our roles. So I own the whole process for Game of Pods, and Melissa is running the onboarding and the assessment of Game of Pods and the onboarding process. So Melissa, you mind explaining kind of what your team brings to the table and what we're expecting?
Sure. What we're basically there for is to help identify how Game of Pods can be successful for each of the pods. Like, when is the right time? In which way can you start getting involved? We provide support and customized guidance throughout your onboarding journey and really throughout your entire play in Game of Pods, right? Like, what are the next steps for you? What makes sense for your team and your pod? Because it's so customizable, it's a little difficult to say, it's plug and play, one size fits all. Depending on each client and each project manager, scrum master, what have you, you might have some particular questions you need some customized guidance for. So that's what we provide, right? So there are some basic things that everybody gets, and then we customize based off of that, right? So everybody gets a welcome email with next steps tailored to the pod leaders, right? So I know a little bit about what's going on with the particular pod or a particular client, and I work with the team to give a little bit more customized steps, right? That makes sense for where you're starting out on your journey. We can do customized onboarding sessions by request, right? So if you want one of those, you can ask us. It's open to everybody. Everybody who joins Game of Pods gets a welcome email with some next steps of how you set up your personal password and join the system. There are many how-to videos, playbooks, user guides, templates, the KPI repository, all available on a microsite. It's I thought we put it on this slide, sorry, info.softvision.com/gameofpods. There is a ton of information presented there to help guide you on your journey. We send out a monthly newsletter with helpful tips, introducing new team members, kind of growing that community. We've just started the concept of ambassadors so that we can connect you with people local to your studios who have been in Game of Pods and understand kind of what their journey has been and how they can share some of that learning with others, right? So it's maybe a little bit more relatable to the kind of projects that you're working on. And always Q&A, right? We're always there. There's a team of us available at podification@softvision.com, available for any kind of custom Q&A or request for personalized onboarding sessions or training or KPI brainstorming sessions, right? On how can I measure this particular thing for my particular project. If you get stuck, we're there to provide all kinds of insight, or like I said, even maybe connect you with other pods who have been there, done that, right? You might be able to share some learnings across. That's something that I'm particularly excited about because it helps us even grow our global communities more, right? Because we're connecting across projects to help each other learn and grow. And I love that part of it. I think that really embraces our core values all together, all of them at once. What we need from you if you're going to join Game of Pods is that you really try to fully understand and embrace the pod model and Game of Pods, right? We're not putting people in here to just like, let me go get every single badge I can possibly get, right? We really want it to be about the journey and setting that maturity path and continuing to improve organically because the team wants to, not because somebody's standing over you, cracking the whip and saying this is what you have to do, right? We don't want to get complacent and just say, hey, we're good enough, right? Nobody's complaining. We always want to be looking, how do we level up that performance and do even better, right? We always want to excite and delight our stakeholders, right? So we want proactive participation and badge requests, right? It shouldn't be only when the podification team is reaching out and poking you, saying, hey, we haven't seen you active in a little while. What's going on? Can we have some help? We want it to be proactive. Make sure that you're really embracing the concept of these KPIs, identifying at least one in each dimension, tracking them, having them be meaningful, aligning with the client. You've got to do that to really be successful with Game of Pods and identify that maturity path. So if you're saying, well, these KPIs aren't for me, then we need to do some discussion and start talking with your delivery leaders and figure out how we can bring those in, right? And before we throw you into Game of Pods and then you feel like there's no value add for you, right? Be willing to define and assess your pod's core members. And this is more than just who we think the VIP is. There's a lot of information about what a core member really means and what is it that assessment kind of process look like, and at what cadence do we do it? How do we involve the clients? Those type of things. We want to incorporate GOP in your daily process, right? This isn't something we only log into once a month. Like, make it part of your core DNA of how you run the team. Or the team runs itself, I should say. We're all trying to be self-organizing. Give us feedback. Like Ryan said, we're always trying to get more feedback. We want to improve this thing. This is a learning exercise as much for us as it is for you. So like, share what you like, what you don't like. It'd be great if I had this. This thing doesn't work for my team because my team is special in this way. The more we hear about that, the more it helps us prioritize the roadmap to build the right features at the right time for you guys and your clients, right? And then have fun, drive your pod to level up on its maturity path, right? Share all those success stories too. Let us know how it's helped you along your journey. Let us share that with everybody else and build what we call like case studies around this.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Melissa. And I will say, I know we said it twice now, but we are building this tool for you. We've got the framework and the structure. But the only way that we're going to embrace this from a cultural perspective and as far as an organization is if you actually enjoy the system and the gaming aspect of it. So what we feel like we built today is something very exciting. I know personally, I'm thrilled to be able to do this demo and to accelerate our development process, open this thing wide up to core members, employees of Cognizant Softvision, and start collecting that information, help build us the roadmap. We've got one structured for us. We can always make adjustments based off of the engagement that we're seeing and the elements that you guys are really appreciating. So what's next? Join the game. After this, we are going to be sending out a survey. And in there, just provide your details around it, your information. And what we'll do is we will start reaching out to individuals. That survey will also have some information around there around feedback, around the demo today, things that you saw, things that you liked, that you didn't like. That'll help us tremendously as we build out this tool. Really, that survey helps us to kind of like structure onboarding and doing assessments of individuals that are going to start getting involved in Game of Pods. So that concludes the demo. I appreciate everyone getting up early, staying up late to watch this demo and listen to me speak for 45 minutes. So thank you very much. Everyone, enjoy your Tuesday. Bye-bye.